Welcome to another episode of All Hands on Tech. I'm your host, Claire Quirion. Today we're diving into the dynamic world of gaming in Nova Scotia. From indie studios to government initiatives, the gaming scene in this province is growing fast and getting international attention. Joining me is Ryan Sno-Wood, a member of the Interactive Society of Nova Scotia, also known as ISNS. He is a leading voice in the industry with deep insights into the challenges, innovations, and opportunities shaping the local game development landscape. The Interactive Society of Nova Scotia strives to grow and strengthen the interactive entertainment industry by fostering a collaborative environment and advocating for its members. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really nice to be here.
I'm so excited for this conversation. I feel like there's so much about this industry that I'm interested about, but I just don't know. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to kind of dive deep in and learn about where it's at and where it's going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll start things off nice and light with some rapid fire questions, and then we'll get into the larger stuff. How's that sound?
Sounds brilliant.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you this question because it's personal to me. As a young person, I was a really big Sims gamer. Well, I called myself a gamer, but that's my question to you. Do you consider Sims people to be real gamers?
It's yes, without question. And it's such an interesting problem in the industry because we get into that no true Scotsman approach to things. So there's these gatekeepers saying, oh, you're not a real gamer because you don't play X. And in reality, if you open up your phone and you play a game, if you go on your computer, you play The Sims, whatever it is that you're playing a game. That makes you a gamer.
Yeah.
You know, whether you are 5 years old, whether you're 95 years old, if you're playing a game, you're a gamer. And the number of people in the world that actually identify as gamers, it's actually a little remarkable because there's actually a subset that don't identify as gamers yet play games. And they refuse to be called that. And it's not uncommon to find young women who refuse to be called a gamer because they find it embarrassing for some reason. I don't know why. My daughter's one of them.
Yeah.
And she's going to shoot me for saying that on me. But yeah, and she's amazing. And she went through Zelda Breath of the Wild. She figured out how to get the sword early. She beat the whole game with 4 hearts. Like, I beat the game finally. I needed like 17 hearts in order to do it. So yeah, it's but if you asked her if she's a gamer, she'd say no. So so there is that weird little mentality around it. It's like, oh, well, you play Sims, you're not really a gamer. It's like, nope, 100% you are. And did you enjoy the experience?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was my life.
Yeah, you had fun. You tried it. It caused you to think differently.
Yeah.
Look at the world differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is gaming.
It taught me life skills. I had to keep those people alive. Right. Then they got pets. Yeah.
And that's one of the key reasons I don't play it, because I don't want to be responsible for these digital life forms.
You're an adult now. You have enough responsibilities in real life. Yeah. I love that. That's true, though. It's because I think there's, a stigma, or I don't even know if that's the right word, but a perception of what a gamer is. It's like saying I'm an athlete. If you just play like recreational sports, it's like you'd never say that necessarily, but you're right. There's probably so many people who are gamers that just aren't captured in that data, or,
Yeah, and I don't know the stats offhand. Entertainment Society of Canada, or ESAC, whatever association, they track a lot of this data, and ESA around the world also tracks it. And the reports that come back, there are billions upon billions upon billions of gamers, and it's remarkable how many might not even identify as such because they refuse to admit to it.
Yeah.
Because of the stigma.
Or they just don't even That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting problem, and it's one of the key problems that faces gaming as a whole. Mm-hmm. It's indicative of a larger problem where gaming has a real problem with its identity. It doesn't really know where it lives. Mm-hmm. Is it entertainment? Is it science? Is it art? Is it tech? Like, where does it fall? And we even see it in governmental programs. There's is it business? There's lots of different. So in Quebec, for example, they regard it more as business. So they tend to focus on tech and business, whereas in Ontario, they regard it more as an art. So from the Ontario government perspective, they tend to focus it more into the arts section of the government. And even when you're looking at reading a newspaper, actually, who reads newspapers? Gaming, any kind of website,
Right.
or anyone who does any kind of reporting, they don't know where to put a report about a video game.
Right.
Like, where does this journalist lie? Are they in the arts? Are they in tech? Like, are they in business? And depends on the subject matter of it.
Right.
And it's a constant problem. And whereby, like, even I say I'm in gaming, and the eye rolls I get sometimes are hilarious. Because I look at people and I just immediately start hitting them with numbers. Well, actually, you know what? Video games are worth $5.1 billion to the Canadian GDP. And they're, wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, no, those are a serious thing. Oh, okay. But, we tend to regard gaming as not so serious.
Right.
And it's got that stigma surrounding it. So it is one of those things where it's a constant battle, and education is really your best friend in that case. It's just getting people to the point where they actually know what it is and accept what it is, and see it as something more worthwhile. It's worth $350 billion worldwide, yet the movie industry is worth $100 billion worldwide.
Yeah.
They take a video game, they turn it into a movie. That video game made it.
Right.
They're a movie now.
Yeah.
Movies are worth less than a third of the industry.
Like The Last of Us, so that was like
Last of Us,
Yeah.
and Minecraft, the movie.
right. Yeah, it's true.
Very big one right there.
Yeah.
The Super Mario movie. We're not
Yeah.
going to talk about the 1990s one. That does not exist. But yeah, it is remarkable, and they're turning more and more to video game IP to turn it into movies
I see.
to capitalize it and turn it into TV shows and things like that, because they recognize the value there.
Yeah.
But which is a little funny because a lot of them were originally created without any of that in mind. So trying to adapt it to that is really tricky. Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, sorry, I totally digress.
No, I mean, that's so interesting. Like, that's already a look into what this conversation is going to be like, because I do think there's so, like, at least from my perspective, and it sounds like a lot of other people feel this way, is we have a lot of questions about the industry, and there seems to be a lot of general misconceptions about it. So, and that was a huge win for Sims people. So I feel like I feel like I did something there. Yeah, I'm changing lives here. Okay, so obviously you're a video game lover. What was the first video game that you fell in love with?
When I was a kid, I grew up on Atari 2600, Gemini, that sort of thing, right? And so I loved playing like Qbert and all these kinds of games. And I really enjoyed them. And I really loved playing them. And I remember saving up all my paper route money to buy my first Atari. Like that was only mine personally, because otherwise I had to use my brother's. And which, how brothers are. And then the Nintendo came out not long afterwards. And so I didn't know anything about this thing. And I went to somebody's house we're just going there for dinner or something. And they said, oh, well, we have a Nintendo. I was like, oh, what's that? And like, yeah. And so they put on this game called Super Mario Brothers. I'm like, okay, I'll go try it out. And it sounds like fun. 8 hours later.
You stayed the night.
We got there like 10 o'clock in the morning. 8 hours later, they were calling me at like 6 p.m. for dinner. And like, I was just like completely freaked out. Like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And to this day, if I hear that sound or see a visual of Super Mario Brothers, I still get a little hit of dopamine.
That's amazing.
Just, I actually left my Super Mario Brothers mug in the car. But, it's, And then, of course, Super Mario has been in over 250 games since. Like, it's just remarkable how much of a player that character is in the industry. But, yeah, that was the one that it just hooked me so bad.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
An iconic character that still to this day is like super relevant,
It really is. Yeah. And the different ways that they've approached putting him into different games or movies or whatever else. And some worked really well, some not so much.
Yeah.
But it is remarkable. You really got to hand it to Nintendo, their ability to capitalize on this IP and just recognize, hey, we got a winner here.
Yeah.
Let's work off that. And then you see other companies trying to do the same thing. Like PlayStation, they're really working to find their identity, for example, or Xbox. They kind of found it with Halo. That kind of became their main beast. It wasn't intentional at the beginning. It just kind of took off. But with each console, they really do, with each major brand, they really do try to find that, because they all want their own Mario. Like, who wouldn't?
Right.
Sega had Sonic.
Yes.
And Sonic couldn't save them, sadly. But
he's only a hedgehog.
He's only a hedgehog. He goes
What do you
fast. So he
expect?
can't, he can't lift the weight of the world on his shoulders, unfortunately. But, so, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I feel like this is going to be a very nostalgic conversation. Okay, so we talked about what got you started, where you found your passion for gaming. So is there any like new game or console that's just out or coming out that you're really excited about?
Well, I mean, the elephant in the room is obviously Switch 2, because that's coming soon.
Yeah.
And at the price point, I'm not going to be able to afford it anytime soon. But that said, I really do look forward to it. I like a lot of the areas that they improved on, and were definitely areas that I kind of felt like, ooh, you can improve on this.
Yeah.
And they knocked it out of the park in such an extraordinary way with the Switch. And prior to that, the Wii was it just boggled everybody's mind.
Yeah.
And so they're on track. Let's see what they do with it and what comes of it. That's the major one right now. I don't know if any other major console releases are coming in. I don't think anybody wants to tangle with Nintendo.
No, let them have their moment.
It's like, I know better than to fight with the beasts. But then as far as games go, there's actually a game locally that I'm really looking forward to. It's a game by Styrex Studios. They've created this game called Button Man. And why it's super interesting to me is that it's based in Prohibition-era Halifax.
Cool.
So but they call it King's Landing, or not King's Landing, King's Harbor,
Okay.
and which is a reference to Anne of Green Gables, because that's what they called Halifax.
Right.
And so they really get into this. They just tap into so many local roots. And when you're playing the game, I've actually seen gameplay footage of it, and a lot of the still shots on it, and you recognize iconic Haligonian landmarks, because they went into the old archives and they pulled out these images and they recreate them in the game. It's just so cool, and you realize like how much Halifax was incredibly vibrant. Like, it's a waterfront. Like, there's a lot of illegal things that kind of work their way into our port and back out again. It's really fascinating, but it's like a living comic. That's so when really cool. the stylization and everything else, it looks like a Tintin comic come alive kind of thing. And they even created their own little comic book with it that they use when they go to shows or whatever. They hand it out. And I grabbed a couple, and I was like, I really want one. I was like, my kids are going to want one. And then the kids took both of them. So I was like, oh, God. But so that's one I'm really excited about. Yeah.
That's cool.
Tapping into our local, because Halifax has a lot to offer with a history. It's brilliant to see things getting tapped into there.
I find that interesting too. There's like some shows where, it's filmed out here and stuff. And I always find it really fun to see how they clip it together, because they'll call it something else. They'll call it like Timber Wolf or Land or Ville or something, but then you can see they clip like, okay, that's a part of Lunenburg and that's like downtown Halifax, and they clip it to make it like one town. And I always find that so fun to watch.
We're just going to walk down the road here, and
it's like all of a sudden they're in like Peggy's Cove, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, it's traveled 100 clicks.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. Okay, so you don't work for the Interactive Society of Nova Scotia. You're a member of ISNS. So can you tell us a little bit about what ISNS does? What's kind of their mission, the whole reason they exist? Yeah.
So I don't know that anybody works for ISNS, technically speaking. It's a nonprofit, right?
Right.
So it was born back in, I think, 2017, 2018. Oh, Jordan's going to get after me for not knowing my history here. But they started off, and the whole idea here was to advocate for our local industry and to recognize that we have one, which I can get into that later. But when they originally started up, the whole idea is to advocate for us, to all group together, and we're stronger together approach. And we recognized, so I came into it much, much later, but the whole point is to advocate for the local industry, to work together to get better, to work with local institutions, to support local studios, and to find ways to, when we all work together, when we teach each other the tricks that we've learned, because a lot of the tricks that we learn are hard won. We learn them through bad experiences.
Right.
So, hey,
Yeah.
here's how you best do this, and it's going to save you the headache that I went through, kind of thing. So there's a lot of mentorship that happens, and it not even necessarily in a formal sense, just in a trading tricks of the trade kind of approach. And then working with the local universities, like so NSCC and DAL, we work really closely with Shift Key Labs. They do quite a lot locally. And we have this direct pipeline with NASCAD and everyone else, but we have this direct pipeline of all these students going through these programs, and we work with the programs themselves so that they get a feel for what it's really like to work in the games industry. And we have a lot of people from the games industry teaching these courses. They've had the experience, and it's not theoretical for them. They know how it works. So they walk in and they develop like at NSCC, for example, they walked in and they said, okay, here's how Studio actually works. I teach them Agile. They actually have an entire board. They have the sticky notes on the board showing them. And then, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's what I have to do. And then they kind of move it along. And they have Scrum meetings every day, and they treat it very much like an actual studio.
Very cool.
And and what ends up happening is that the students come in there and they have a much stronger idea as to how this works.
Yep.
We also have a really burgeoning indie scene here that a lot of people really don't know exists. Because they don't advertise it. It's not something that they.
It wouldn't be indie to advertise it,
You're not exactly wrong on that one. But they actually have like an indie dev play-in chair, for example. It happens every few Sunday, like every other Sunday or once a month. I'm not exactly sure. I've gone to a few of them, and they're so much fun. Daniel Nascimento, he helps run them, and MDAD. He helps get them on the go. He offers up his space at Maritime Digital Art and Design, and we all work together. That's not officially a part of ISNS,
right?
Yet we're very good friends with them because we're all part of the same mission to help the industry grow.
Right. So what do you do at those meetups?
They couple different things. Very often a dev will go up and just show their game. Hey, here's what I'm working on. And then other people offer their suggestions. And so the game kind of develops from there. And what's really fun is when they set them all up and you go around and you play all these different games. And all these games are in development or whatever else. And so I took my son there one time. He's 11 and he's just like living on cloud 9.
Yeah,
right? And he has no problem sharing his opinion. He used to help me. I used to game scale for Tripwire Interactive. And Felix used to come along and help me out with this. And I'd ask his opinion on different games, at least the ones I was allowed to show him.
Yeah.
And he loved it. He kind of he's developing that sense of what makes a game work or not. So we go to these things and he's offering advice back to the devs, right? And they are so open. They're so kind.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that defines the video game industry is the kindness and openness that's there. I remember calling my wife when I went to the MIGS back in 2022. It was my first major game industry event. And I called her from the hotel and I was like, I think I found my people. Like it was just, these people
awesome.
are so kind. And like you speak to them and you speak video game and they understand. And it's like, you don't need a translator. It works great.
Yeah.
And there's absolute acceptance. And this is what goes back to your original question with The Sims. Is that a gamer? And it's like, yeah. And when you're around other gamers, this is what they do. They look at it like, yeah. And you can say the most ridiculous thing that to anybody else would sound foolish, but to other gamers, like, yeah, I totally get that. So
that's amazing. I think it's great to hear that as a community, people are very open and receptive to feedback and like willing to collaborate. Because I think sometimes in the arts, it can not always be that way, or people can take, because it's their art, it's their, people can kind of maybe take offense or like not as be receptive, So it's nice to hear that, I don't know, it's a very collaborative and open space. And I think that's that's helped move it forward, because if you have that type of mindset, then you're willing to grow, you're willing to change, and yeah.
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of developers, a lot of the industry recognizes that exactly, that it's you when you are that open, how easily that helps you move forward and get even better. So it's there's something else I was going to add to that. I don't remember what it was, but yeah.
That's right. If you think of it later, you
Yeah,
can add it
exactly.
in. So what you mentioned about working with ShiftKey Labs and SCC. Is there any partnership in particular that you feel has like really been impactful in supporting or elevating the industry?
There have been a number. One of the key ones in Canada here is CMF, so the Canadian Media Fund, Canada Media Fund, sorry. They really help the gaming industry. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but it's a very large media fund that all the major providers in Canada all pay into. So Bell Media, like all the major cable people. So they all kind of pay into this fund. And then they have about $350 to $400 million worth of a fund that they can then dole out to Canadian projects to help push Canadian culture, to help build and push Canadian culture. Because if it wasn't for this, we are 1/10 the population of the U.S. We would be overrun in a heartbeat by U.S. Culture. And you can see that in our radio stations where we have that 30% law where our local stations are forced to play Canadian content. Mm-hmm. I would love for them to play more different content, same like couple songs. But the fact is that we have to do that. We have to recognize that. So with the Canadian Media Fund, a portion of that goes to movies, television, and everything else, and then a portion goes to interactive media, video games. And as a direct result, we've had some really amazing games and studios all built up over time that continue to tap into this media fund, and then more and more. So locally, we have a number of different studios that all tap into that. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's Button Man for Starx Studios. That's one example. They're able to tap into that media fund. And it really, and they have different ways of doing it, right? You have an innovation fund, that's on a prototyping fund, so they can just apply for that and it's just a grant. Whereas they have another commercialization one whereby they have to pay them a royalty over the next 7 years kind of thing. So depending on how successful the game is, the CMS is going to get their money back and then some, or it might not get nothing because the game goes, it doesn't quite make it. So, but either way, that money is there and it helps the industry grow. And it's one of the more defining factors about Canada. And a lot of other countries look at us with, wow, that's so cool. I wish we had that.
Yeah.
So I do talk to people from other countries regularly, and they're like, yeah, you guys are so lucky. I was like, no, we work for it.
Because it's not necessarily government money. Like that would be a nonprofit in itself, right? And
Yeah, so it's I don't know quite how they're defined, so I don't want to get put words in their mouth or anything like that. My cursory understanding is that it's the money that gets put in there, and then that pot gets then doled out. Yeah.
Very cool. I love it. I think, that creates a new opportunity. And sometimes like that gives them a bit more freedom on how they disperse the funds, et cetera.
Yeah, and they're typically made up. So there's like when you apply, they have a scoring system and they go through and they figure out, is this game going to be profitable?
Right.
Does this game, maybe it's more cultural. Maybe this game is really important to local culture. And so there's a lot of opportunity in gaming in that. So you said something earlier that caught my attention. You talked about oftentimes with art. And my friend Diego Ricciuti, he wrote this amazing book about game design. And in it, he mentioned something that really stuck with me. He said, game design is 50% art, 50% science. Mm-hmm. And it really stuck with me because, that explains part of our problem with our identity, actually. But when you start getting into that, you realize how much opportunity there is for storytelling. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to Indigenous people, for example, they have extraordinary stories, such a rich history they can tap into and have their voice heard. And there is the possibility to even resurrect languages that have not been spoken in a very long time. So and in fact, that's going to be something coming up soon at one of our events. So on that note, part of my role with ISNS is to help out with local events and things like that. But with my own role, I'm director of marketing and communications for XP Gaming, And we run all the major B2B events in Canada, so the majority of them at least. And these are areas where we see the importance of connecting the industry and bringing them all together, and you see the ideas flow. And we also do a lot of teaching. So there's a lot of, we bring in speakers so that they can teach rather. And one of the key things that comes out of these is learning about the different ways that that people in the gaming industry can tap into this history and can share their history with the world. So, and there's going to be some interesting things come out of that. That's come. I think I actually get to announce this week, so I'm pretty excited about that. So it's it's forefront of mind at the moment.
This podcast will come out after that, so don't worry.
Good. We are safe.
You're not exposing anything.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought about how gaming would be defined. But 50% art, 50% science, like, I feel like that's exactly it.
Yeah. Diego is one of those people, every conversation with him is like a university course. I love talking to him because he's
really smart guy.
He's so smart.
Yeah,
and his way of breaking something down and just looking to, okay, well here, just break it down in such a way that, oh yeah, I see that.
Yeah. I think that's an indicator of like real intelligence is when they take something really complex and can like say it in a way that the rest of us can understand, To me, that's like ultimate intelligence when they can break it down. That means they really understand what they're saying,
Oh my God. Yeah. And that's one area that he's absolutely brilliant in. And he can break through to a dummy like me. We're doing good. So, yeah.
Okay. You talked about and I'd love for you to reiterate the stat, if you have any more about like the size of the sector in Canada. You said
5.1 billion to the Canadian GDP.
That's amazing. So
which is actually down a little, believe it or not. They do these studies every 2 years. Nordicity they work with ESAC, Entertainment Software Association of Canada. Ha!
Woo!
I knew I'd remember
Nailed
it if I get the initialism, said the initialism enough times. So my friend Christian Roberts at Nordicity, he puts together these reports, and they really delve into the Canadian industry, and it's really remarkable. I love going through these reports whenever they come out. So the latest numbers, thanks to COVID kind of pumped everything up really hard, right?
Yeah.
And then the entire industry experienced this crazy flux. So what ended up happening was there was a lot of investors and all saw the money that was coming in of COVID. Everyone was sitting at home doing nothing, playing video games because you had no other choice. It became the survival mechanism, right? And then it hit such a peak, and then afterwards, that kind of growth is unsustainable, right? And then so everybody's like, oh, it's going to keep growing like that, and they invested accordingly without thinking that no, it's got to go back to a normal, 9% per year growth, not 30% per year. So when it did that, a lot of people got scared, and they started shuttering doors. And they also overinvested in areas. They started throwing money without doing due diligence, so that didn't work out so well either. So we saw a lot of studio closures over the last few years. So Canada went from almost 1,000. We're down to a little over 800. That said, there was consolidations, there were mergers, acquisitions. There's a number of indie studios that just kind of closed down. They just went off to go work for a regular studio kind of thing. So, and a lot of indie studios are actually just 1 to 4 people. So they're really quite tiny. So when those all kind of close down, it doesn't. It seems like it's bad, but it's actually not nearly as bad as you might think. These are very, very talented individuals who can take their talents elsewhere.
There's a lot of context there as to like why there is such
exactly, right? You see a number go from 5.5 billion down to 5.1. You're like, oh, something bad. It's like, no. It's just a market adjustment, and we're coming back out of it again. We're swinging back up again, so it's not a concern. It hurts. Don't get me wrong. It hurts. Yeah. I have a friend, Amir. He runs this entire community online, and he goes out of his way to find people jobs in gaming.
Wow.
And he's remarkable. He's got a website devoted to it and everything else. If anyone wants to go to it, it's amirsatvat.com. And he's one of the most kindest humans I've ever met. And he does this just for kindness of his heart.
Wow.
He wants gamers to get jobs. And he set up mentorships and everything else. And you see a lot of that in the industry. And a lot of the people that he's kind of partnered with in the industry, they also do the same thing. And they're trying to find gamers jobs. So it's a very supportive industry that way.
It sounds close knit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when these crazy ups and downs hit, you recognize that actually it's an industry that's so well. They just we really work hard to work together and to. In Canada, in fact, I was talking to an American one time, and after a talk, she came to me. She's like, "So the guy in that talk just said something weird." I was like, "Oh, yeah, what was that? You guys will lend each other developers?" Like, what do you mean? And she's like, "A studio will lend another studio a developer?" I was like, "Well, yeah." She's like, "We don't do that in America." I was like, "Okay." No, in Canada, it's very common. We support each other. We help each other out.
Yeah.
And it's not at all uncommon just to lend somebody support without expectation of repayment or anything like that. It's just a matter of helping out. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of co-development and lots of work that is much more official. But so and on that note, so in Canada, we have about 34,000 jobs that are the direct result of game development. The average salary is around 102,000. And when you start getting really looking at how that affects everything, so you have over 800 studios, you have major hubs. Montreal, I think, is third in the world when it comes to cities for game development.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest IP on the planet is developed there.
Wow.
Like Assassin's Creed, for example. And actually, we have an Assassin's Creed developed here in Halifax, too, with Ubisoft here, the mobile version. So it's really important to recognize how much crazy development happens in Canada. Like Dead by Daylight, that's a Canadian game made by a Canadian studio. So it's when you start looking at the development space in Canada and realize, oh my God, it's huge.
Yep.
But where it gets wild is how far above our weight we punch. Like we are so far above. We should not be punching at the level we do. We absolutely should not.
I love an underdog story.
Oh, we are such an underdog. But where we stick to that underdog, sadly, is IP development. So we do develop our own IP here in Canada. So Buttonman, for example, that's a local development. But then we also work with a lot of IP that's owned elsewhere.
Okay.
So a lot of that major IP. So Dead by Daylight, that's Canadian IP. Behavior Interactive owns that. But when you get into Assassin's Creed, for example, that's owned by somebody else. Luigi's Mansion, that's owned by somebody else. So you get into these things. So like Cuphead, that's a Canadian success story. Great, So you, but somewhere in the vicinity of about 80%, I think, of IP developed in Canada that's majorly successful is owned by foreign countries.
Interesting.
By companies in foreign countries. So it is an area of improvement that we're really actively working on as a Canadian society. But there's a lot of opportunity there, obviously. But then when you start looking into the numbers and you see it goes Quebec, then Ontario, then BC, you have the Alberta is really well. They have an up-and-coming gaming industry that they're developing. And then the prairies, and of course Halifax here, Atlantic provinces here. And when you start looking at the development, the gaming development across the board, you realize, first of all, how large Canada is. It's really big. And it's quite divided. And then you start realizing how disconnected a lot of it is, because what happens is you're talking to somebody in Quebec, like, I really wish I had somebody who knew how to do X. And like, actually, you know what? There's somebody over in BC that does that. Like, oh, really? And so you kind of connect them and they're like, oh, great. And they all kind of work together. And of course, that's one of the key reasons why we run these B2B events, is to get everybody together so they can learn what each other does.
Do all the provinces have organizations similar to ISNS?
Thank you.
Okay.
You took me exactly in the direction I was trying to go. You got it. So in each province, and this goes back to a couple different things, but so here we have ISNS. New Brunswick has Interactive New Brunswick, Video Games PEI. You start going across Canada, and Interactive Ontario. They're really lovely, lovely people up there. And in BC, we have Digital BC. And there's other ones. Saskatchewan has their own, in Manitoba. And then in Quebec is kind of the oddball in the mix. So each of them has like their nonprofits and all that. But Quebec actually has La Guilde des Jeux de Vidéo de Quebec. And I am so sorry, guys. I know I did not pronounce that properly.
Sounded good to me.
We won't get into it. But they are remarkable because what they've done is they've taken, there's almost 300 studios in Quebec, right? Or more actually. And what they've done is they've made them all part of a membership. And so basically what they do is they charge a membership fee, just like a lot of the other ones. And that helps bolster them. And they have enough of a powerhouse that it allows them to lobby the government to do different things on their behalf, but it also makes them one incredible behemoth. They are, and they are
unified voice.
They're a unified voice. You got it. And we actually work with them actively. We run Montreal International Game Summit, is owned by Le Guild. They run this, and it's one of the oldest gaming events in Canada. It is the oldest gaming event in Canada. And every year in the fall, we all get together and we bring in people from all over the world. And when you're there, you suddenly realize how incredible the gaming industry is. Like, whoa, this is really cool. And don't get me wrong, like we're talking, 1,200 people to 3,000 people, depending on the year. This year it's going to be even bigger. But when you compare that with some of the other ones in the rest of the world, there are some much, much larger events like Gamescom and all that. But it is remarkable to see everybody come together. And it goes back to that feeling of community. Mm-hmm. You walk down and everybody's smiling and they're happy. And I often joke that we're all kind of doing this, kind of looking at the corner of our eye, because we're like, somebody's got to figure out that we're getting away with this. We get to have this much fun in our lives. And don't get me wrong, it's a stunning amount of work. Game devs are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. Yeah. A 60-hour work week is just extremely common. Yeah. But in the end, what they're doing is such a labor of love. So it's and that stems from that incredible passion that you see when you're walking around the floor and you actually get to meet these people. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's so alluring about meeting people in the industry is the passion that you encounter and the happiness of getting to work with that, right? And it's really amazing. Sorry, and again, I digress.
Well, I think conferences and events like that, they can be super invigorating, being surrounded by like-minded people, learning from each other, and also seeing what other people are up to. It's so easy for a year to pass and you've, been in your silo of working on a project, et cetera. And then you go to these events and you're like, wow, there's so much out there. People are doing such cool things. And I think it's really crucial to have events like that and create those connections.
Some of the greatest innovations come out of gaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's unreal what comes out. A lot of the game, actually, the word unreal, it's a good word to look at, because Unreal Engine 5 is one of the major, like you see a lot of these games that look hyper realistic and everything else. It's usually made in Unreal Engine 5 or 4, whichever version. Here's where that gets interesting. Mandalorian, all of that was green screened, and then they recreated everything in Unreal Engine. Right, so which is a video game. It's made for video games, yet here they are using it for TV shows and movies. Yeah. So they can recreate. So it's so powerful. Yeah. And all of this was developed for gaming, yet they can use it for movies and TV. Yeah. So you start to recognize where all of these innovations come from. The whole AI debate right now is so funny, because to us, we've been doing AI forever. How do you think?
That was gonna be one of my questions. It's always a question on these podcasts: is like, how is AI impacting your field of work, and like what is it being received, how are you using it, etc.
So AI is one of those funny little beasts in that
the funny little beast.
it is in the
you should make that the title of this podcast.
Well, it's when you look at it, Age of Empires. Yep. You drop something down, you tell them to build a house or something. Now you've created an object that's in the way now, right? Mm-hmm. Or you chop down trees. And you watch little dudes, and they all find their way around it, and they kind of work. This is pathfinding, right? It's AI. It's machine learning. Yeah. And so we've been doing that forever in the gaming industry. So now the AI is like this big thing, and gaming looks at us like, y'all, we've been doing this for ages. Like, this is not. But where it gets interesting and problematic is when it starts getting into copyright. And then you start recreating things, and they start saying, oh, well, I'm going to create this in the style of, we're going to do this entire game, and it will all be based off of the style of this other game. Right. And at that point, you're heading into theft territory, right? Mm-hmm. And you say like, listen, we're looking at the I'm just trying to think of a major author, say Stephen King, we're going to make this entire game. All the dialogue is going to be identical to a Stephen King novel.
Right.
And essentially what you've done is you've taken a large language model and you've trained it with somebody else's work, and now you're going to capitalize on that. So you get into issues there, and with art in particular, you run into some of these issues. So it comes down to finding ways to handle that in an ethical way.
Yeah.
And you'll find with a lot of the talks that happen, like at XP Game Summit that's coming up in Toronto, or there's another one coming up here in Atlantic Canada, XP IndieBiz Connect in Charlottetown, coming up on June 6th. There will be buzz. There will be talk about this. At XP Game Summit, we will actually have talks specifically to AI and ethical dilemmas behind it all. Everything right down to even how you speak to an AI. Does AI have feelings? And you kind of look at these things, and you start looking at things differently, and you realize that it's a tool. Yeah. As long as you look at it as a tool in your toolbox. Yeah. And you don't use it as a copy machine. You don't try to copy what other people are doing. You use it to help generate your own ideas or whatever else. As long as you can use it ethically, you're okay. Yeah. It's when you start using it unethically, then it becomes a problem. And this goes to any tool. If you can use so many things for unethical ways, or you can use it for good. And it comes down to how you use the tool. So I don't blame the tool. Yeah. Which is where we run into problems, because people are like, AI, and they, the pitchforks come out and everything else, like, the power down. Let's just recognize it's a tool. Yeah. And it's in the hands of the user as to how they handle things. So
I think that's consistent across those lessons you just said. It can be applied to any industry and any tool, there's context, and how you use it in gaming, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't be using it to steal other people's work. You shouldn't be taking it 100% at face value. You shouldn't, all these, they're just rules of thumb that everyone should consider, no matter how you're using AI.
Yeah, and it's legal. It's built into our laws. Right. It's a little tricky for the law to keep up with a lot of this stuff, because when they wrote it, they tend to be quite specific.
Outdated. Yes.
Yeah, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we didn't use that word, fine, but come on, man, it's right there. Yeah. So yeah, they do get into some troubles there. But when you look at the history of video games, it's actually quite funny, because if we're being perfectly honest, the early beginning stages of video games was a little Wild West. Yep. And certain larger companies that shall remain unnamed kind of got their start by copying other games. Right. So you do see those things happen, and that has happened in the past. And it does still happen, where people will carbon copy another game. They'll just literally rip the code and then recreate and then drop it onto Steam and try to make a profit off it. So, and then you also see something called asset flips. Which a lot of people have an issue with, whereby you use a lot of the, in the game engines, in the stores, you can just get these free assets, or just buy a little asset pack and use those to create a new game. And you'll see people, what has happened in the past is some not so great games. You've probably seen them on your mobile store or whatever else. And so people get a little contrary about that. So there's always something. Yeah. Right. There's always something out there where people get a little nervous about, hey, you're stealing this, or you're doing this, or this is unethical, or so it comes back to that no true Scotsman thing. I try to encourage people, don't be gatekeepers. If it's not great, it's not going to succeed. Yeah. Don't worry about it. You don't have to get wound up about it. And so there's no point in trying to, but if you got somebody just fresh at a university, they're building their first game, or they're brand new to the industry, and they're building their first game, they use assets and then change them, and then do something else. Why are you going to beat them up for it? Come on, guys. There's just no reason for that. Yeah. So you do, or if they used AI in a funky way, as long as they're remaining ethical, leave them alone. It's okay.
And it's a creative thing too, as well. So it's kind of hard to, unless it's obviously unethical or illegal, it's kind of hard to judge, I feel like, art in a way that you could be like, no, you did that wrong, Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There's bound to be people out there who say you did that wrong. Get that a lot for sure. But it is a case of, with every new technology, they do try to find a way to put it into games, or it generates from games, and they try to figure out ways to monetize it in other ways.
And you see that with crypto, with all that stuff, Web 2.0 or 3.0, whichever one we're at right now. And they continue to push the envelope as to how the industry works. When you look at the industry 15 years ago, it was mainly PC and console taking up a pretty large chunk, PC being in there. Now when you look at it, if you look at a chart, likely over 60% is mobile gaming.
Interesting.
It's remarkable how much it shifts and curves. And that's one of the key reasons why it's hard to keep ahead of the curve in gaming, is because it worked 2 years ago, might not work now.
Right.
What worked 5 years ago definitely isn't working right now. Things change quite dramatically. I came into the industry in 2019, and what worked then to market a game, nope, doesn't work now. And in 2019, it was a local game meetup that I went to. That's how I learned we have a game industry here in Canada, in Halifax, because, and that's one of the key things with ISNS is that we're working on, is letting the world know that, hey, we have a gaming industry. It's freaking awesome. But we don't ever talk about it.
Yeah.
So we really got to get out of that mind space of not talking about it. So, and back to what we were talking about earlier about those numbers with the Canadian gaming industry, 88% of the games created in Canada are exports. We export, that's where our revenue comes from. 88% is in digital exports. That's insane.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other product in Canada that's created, not that I've really looked into this, but you just think about that number, 88%.
Yeah, that's nuts.
It's an insane number.
Yeah.
And you think we are exporting to the rest of the world. So things that are created here in Nova Scotia are just being developed and pushed out into the world. And the rest of the world is tapping into this stuff. Tunic was developed here in Nova Scotia. In 2023, that game was one of the biggest games. I was at the Canadian Game Awards, and I watched the team, because Andrew Schuldeis is the one he created here, and he had an extended team who attended the event on his behalf. They could hardly sit down because they had to keep getting up to come down and get an award. And because how many awards it won. And that was, again, developed here. And when that happens, it becomes this lighthouse, this beacon to local developers say, oh my God, I can do that here. I can actually create here. I can do more here than whatever it is, like the stereotypical thought process as to what my life should be here in Nova Scotia.
Do you think people know, globally, do people know that we have a good gaming industry? Are there certain international markets that you're looking to get into or that we're most recognized in? What is the reputation of the gaming industry or recognition of the gaming industry here in Canada?
Well, that's where it gets interesting, is Canada is horrible at tooting our own horn. We are so bad at it. It's remarkable. We're too busy apologizing or something. I don't know. But, so we go into the rest of the world hey, we exist. Sorry. But so there are, when I talk to the rest of the world in the gaming industry, a lot of them know about us because we are, again, we're a behemoth. And so people recognize that Canada has this industry, yet most Canadians don't, which is really quite funny. It's such, we're more popular outside our own borders.
Do you think we need to get out more? Do you think if more people in our industry went to these events and saw, what do you think is the gap there?
I think that's a major thing.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, we are focused on that so that there's an active perspective of looking outwards to go to these events, to create delegations, to actually ensure the rest of the world knows that, hey, Canada has a gaming industry. Quebec has been really good at that. They actually have...
Quebec is great at doing its own thing,
Oh, they're so good. And we can learn from them. We really can learn from them. But again, they look at gaming as a business. They're sharp about this. And that's not to insult anybody else. Everybody has, again, 50% art, 50% science, right? And so it's... who's to say one is right and one is wrong?
Totally,
right? So it's... But going out there into the world, but advertising ourselves and really going out there and working with a lot of our journalists to say, hey, listen, this is what's happening here in Nova Scotia. This is what's happening in Atlantic Canada. This is what's happening in Canada. And one of the things that really helped was all the shenanigans down south of the border with the tariffs and all that caused a lot of buy Canadian kind of things, which I'm not a fan of. I, especially with the gaming industry, we're good friends with a lot of game developers in the U.S. I don't necessarily want to get into that. However, it did cause them to do one thing that I liked, was that they showcased what was made in Canada, which is, again, something we're not good at.
Yeah.
It's like, tell you what, guys, good idea. Let's just do it more often and not in response to something else. So,
it's a good reminder.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we really do have to focus on that and really shine a light on what we do here a little more often, a little more effectively, and work with our local journalists. But again, a lot of them are kind of struggling because their own publications don't quite know where to put them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it does. There's lots of opportunity, without question. We're getting better. And that's one of the key things I'm focused here on, is to advertise to the rest of the world that, hey, Nova Scotia has a gaming industry.
Yeah.
Atlantic Canada has a gaming industry. And that actually goes back to that event that's coming up in PEI.
Mm-hmm.
That's a collaboration between XP Gaming and a lot of local groups like Iron Fox and everybody else. And that's in Innovation PEI and all these different groups. And it's remarkable because what we're doing is we're putting together an event that's solely focused on indie dev studios, because they know how to make games. We don't need to tell them that.
Yeah.
But they need to know the business side of it.
Yep.
And this is where, back to the art versus science thing, because so many game dev studios do an amazing job building these games. They create these innovations, these crazy games, and blow your mind to play.
Yeah.
And then on the business side, like, and now we got to market this. It's like, okay, how do we do that?
Yeah.
I got to talk to legal. Like, what do I talk to legal about? It's these are blatantly real questions where larger studios, more seasoned, would know how to handle, right?
Yeah.
So we're bringing in publishers and investors and larger studios to come in and say, hey guys, here's how you do this.
Yeah.
And so and this is all going to be in tiny little PEI, right? And so it's really brilliant. And the next year it might move to Halifax. So we're going to swing around the province, but it also gives us an idea to flex a little to the rest of the world, to show the rest of the world, like, hey, listen, this is what's happening here in Atlantic Canada. Look at all the cool stuff that's happening. And and through Canada as well, we do the same thing at the MIGS or XP Game Summit, and we try to create these moments where we can talk to the press, and the press love it because they have a chance to, to kind of flex to the rest of the world, like, hey, look, we're doing cool stuff here, and we are innovating, we are driving the video game industry forward here, and it's important that the rest of the world perks up and says, hey, cool.
Yeah.
Can I help? Yeah, cool. Send us your stuff. We want to work with you too.
Yeah.
So there's definitely lots of opportunities there.
That's great. And it sounds like there's so much value in an organization like ISNS, to create those wraparound supports for these organizations, and especially the indie ones, and sometimes, we always say, like, people get so busy working in the business instead of on the business, because you're so into whatever, getting that game done. And then you take a breath, like come up for air and you're like, oh, wow.
You just described the gaming industry.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like that just really reinforces the value of an organization like that. That brings people together, provides supports, creates connections. It's amazing. So is there anything else other than that event? So when is that event in PEI?
So that is on June 6th.
Okay,
in
June
PEI.
6th. Are tickets like available?
They're available now. Yep. The website, I should probably just share the link with you to include in it if you like, because it's XP. I don't even know. I can't even describe the URL offhand, right?
Specific,
but you can look up like XP Indie Biz Connect Atlantic, and it will actually show up in Google search. So, awesome. So there's that event coming up, and then for locally, we actually have meetups that happen. There's actually a Discord server devoted to ISNS.
Okay.
All this information can be found on the website, on the ISNS website.
Great.
Interactive Nova Scotia website. I'm failing at the URLs here.
I think everyone
I literally just Google it myself. I don't even punch it in. Right? So there are local meetups that happen, and it's really important that people know about this, because going on the Discord, following ISNS on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or whatever other platforms we're on, mainly LinkedIn, though, is a large area that we like to communicate on. And it's really important that if you are local, that you are into game development, you are curious about game development, you like to follow it, by all means, please follow it. We've done some really cool collaborative work with a lot of locals. Like we originally started with Halcon, with kind of working in with them, and we're still really good friends with them. We still partner with each other on different things. We worked with the Museum of Industry. I don't know if you heard about that. There was an event last year where they did an entire showing on all the games created locally. And it was absolutely brilliant. And there's this entire history of video games in Nova Scotia. Super cool. They were amazing. And then, so locally we do, with Shift Key Labs, there's opportunities for students to come in, or people who want to learn to code, or to help out with their pitch decks or their resumes or whatever. There's always something going on. And then there's these monthly meetups. There's a little mixer. Anybody can come. You join in and you get to hang out with a bunch of other game devs and just laugh, play games, do whatever. And really tap into how lovely these people are. Yeah. They're just the kindest humans ever. And you just get to spend time with them. It's
just come for the vibes, if anything, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes there's a cover charge if there's if it's at depending on where it's at or whatever else. But otherwise, so I'll include all that information. I'll just send it to you afterwards. And so joining the Discord is a really great way to keep on top of this stuff and just keeping on top of what's happening locally and recognizing how much is happening locally. Yeah. And it's really cool. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I learned so much. I'm sure everyone who is listening learned so much, and we'll definitely include those links so people can learn more and maybe go to some events and check out some of the things that you guys are doing. So thanks so much, Ryan. This has been amazing, and I appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.